The snow had been falling since noon. By 7 in the evening, Boston wore it like a burial shroud, white and heavy and indifferent to everything underneath. The streets along Newbury had been sanded twice and still glistened with black ice under the amber streetlights. Pedestrians moved in hunched clusters, scarves pulled up over their mouths, breath rising in small clouds that the wind immediately stole. Ethan Cole had no business being on Newbury Street. He parked his truck, a 2009 Ford F-150, with a cracked taillight and a heating system that worked at about 60% capacity, in a spot 2 blocks over that technically required a resident sticker. He fed the meter, pulled his jacket tighter, and stood for a moment on the sidewalk looking at the restaurant across the street. Cassiel. The name was etched into a brushed brass plaque beside a door flanked by potted olive trees, their branches dusted with snow. The kind of place where the menu didn't list prices. He had the invitation in his coat pocket, a cream-colored card his buddy Marcus had pressed into his hand 3 days ago, with the energy of a man bestowing great treasure. "My cousin works the front desk. She owed me a favor. I'm not using it. You need to get out of the house, Ethan. You have been in that garage for 11 months straight." Ethan had tried to refuse. He'd tried 4 separate times. Marcus had simply walked away and texted him the reservation name. So here he was. He crossed the street, pushed through the heavy door, and was immediately swallowed by warmth and the low murmur of money at rest. Candlelight, dark wood paneling, tablecloths so white they looked like fresh snow. A sommelier who glided rather than walked. Ethan stood at the host stand and gave the reservation name Reeves, party of 1, and the host. A young man whose posture suggested he had been raised by royalty, nodded and said, "Right this way, sir." He was led through the restaurant to a corner table near the window. The kind of table that framed the street outside like a painting snow and streetlights and the slow movement of bundled strangers. It was, Ethan had to admit, genuinely beautiful. He sat down. He picked up the menu and realized, with the mild panic of a man who could not identify half the ingredients listed, that he was in serious trouble. He was still studying the menu when he heard the soft mechanical whir of a wheelchair approaching, and he looked up. She was not what he expected. He didn't know what he'd expected. He hadn't expected anything, specifically. But she was perhaps 30, with dark blonde hair pinned loosely at the back of her neck and a few strands escaping around her face. She wore a deep navy dress, simple and elegant, and her hands resting in her lap were slightly ink-stained at the fingertips. Her eyes were gray, the particular shade of gray that appears in winter skies, just before the clouds give up and let it snow. She was looking at him with an expression that balanced between polite and uncertain. "I think," she said, "you might be at my table." Ethan looked around. The tables on either side of him were occupied. He looked at the candle, the single rose in a thin vase, the menu placed precisely at the center. He looked back at her. "Your name is Reeves?" he said. "No," she said. "My name is Amelia. The table reservation is under Grant." He looked at the card in his jacket pocket. Reeves. He looked at the placard on the table, which he had not, until this moment, noticed. "Grant. I'm at the wrong table," he said. "You are," she agreed. There was something in her voice, not irritation. Exactly. Something quieter. The particular tone of a person who had been braced for a certain kind of evening and was not entirely sure whether this development was better or worse. The sommelier materialized with the specific timing of men trained to appear at delicate moments. He looked at Ethan. He looked at the reservation placard. He drew a breath that communicated an entire dissertation on the nature of confusion. "Sir, your reservation is..." "I know," Ethan said. "I'll move. Sorry." He started to push his chair back. "Wait." He stopped. Amelia was looking out the window. The snow was thickening, pressing itself against the glass in slow, deliberate sheets. Her blind date, whoever he was, had not arrived. The restaurant hummed around her. She was alone in the way that only certain people are alone, the way that has weight to it, texture, history. She looked back at Ethan. "You can stay," she said. "If you want, the other table is open." A small pause. "Or, you can stay here." My dinner companion appears to be a no-show. Ethan looked at his own empty table across the room. He looked at this woman with her ink-stained fingers, and her winter-gray eyes, and the quiet dignity of someone who was used to sitting in the middle of difficult moments without flinching. "Only if you're sure," he said. "I'm not," she said. "But you can stay anyway." He sat back down. The sommelier retreated, with the expression of a man who had witnessed many inexplicable things in the course of his career and had made peace with all of them. "Ethan," he said, and extended his hand. She shook it. Her grip was firm and direct. "Amelia." Outside, the snow kept falling, indifferent and white and relentless, burying the city in something that looked almost like grace. They ordered. Ethan pointed at the third item on the menu because it had the fewest words he couldn't pronounce, and Amelia ordered in the practiced tone of someone who had been coming to restaurants like this since childhood. The sommelier suggested a wine. Ethan said he'd have water. Amelia asked for the same, which surprised him. "You don't have to do that on my account," he said. "I wasn't," she said. "I genuinely prefer water." He believed her. There was something disarming about the way she said things, direct without being blunt, honest without performing honesty. He hadn't expected that. He'd expected this space to produce people who spoke in performance, who said everything at a slight angle. She didn't. They talked the way strangers sometimes do when they've been accidentally marooned together in a comfortable space, cautiously at first, then with increasing ease, following the natural current of one topic leading to another. She asked what he did. He told her. Mechanic. Owned a small garage off Commonwealth Avenue. Had been doing it since he was 22. He said it the way he always did, watching for the flicker of recalibration in the other person's face. The subtle adjustment of expectation. She didn't flicker. "Do you like it?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. And then, because it was true, there's something satisfying about it. You put something broken on the lift. You figure out what's wrong. You fix it. You put it back on the road. He shrugged. Most things in life don't work that clean. She looked at him in a way that suggested she was actually listening, not merely waiting for him to finish. "No," she said. "They don't." He asked what she did. She said she painted not professionally. Not anymore. But she still did it. And she did some work with her family's company, administrative and consulting. But he got the sense from the careful neutrality with which she said it that this was a topic with edges. He didn't push. He told her about Lily. He didn't plan to. It wasn't the kind of thing he led with, ordinarily, not because he was ashamed, but because people's reactions to single dad ran the gamut, and he'd grown tired of navigating them. But the conversation had moved naturally there. Something about what he did on weekends, and he said his daughter usually set the agenda. "How old?" Amelia asked. 7, he said. "She's 7, and she has very strong opinions about everything. Pancake shapes, which puddle to jump in. The correct method for building a snowman." He paused. "She informed me last week that the eyes should always be pine cones, not buttons, and she had scientific reasons." Amelia laughed. It was a small laugh, unguarded, the kind that happens before the person has decided to let it happen. She caught it and composed herself, but her eyes were bright. "She sounds wonderful," she said. "She is," Ethan said simply. "She's the best thing I ever did." He didn't say anything about Lily's mother. Amelia didn't ask. The silence around it was comfortable in the way of two people who both understood that some stories are not ready to be told to someone you met 40 minutes ago. Outside the window, the snow had softened into something finer, almost translucent, and the streetlights caught it so that it fell in ribbons of pale gold. A couple walked by, pressed together against the cold, the woman's laughter visible as a cloud of white breath before she pressed her face into the man's shoulder. Amelia was watching it. Ethan watched her watch it. She had not mentioned the wheelchair. He had not asked about it. It was simply there, the way a piece of furniture is in a room present, unremarkable, belonging to the space. He was aware of it in the background of his attention, the way you're aware of background noise, acknowledging without fixating. He suspected she was aware of his awareness and was grateful for its shape. She had the ink-stained fingers of a painter, and the eyes of someone who had been required, at some point, to reckon with something very large and had done it mostly alone. He didn't know her story, but he recognized the particular quality of a person who had walked through something and come out the other side changed but standing. He recognized it because he had done the same. "Thank you," she said, still looking at the snow. "For what?" "For sitting at the wrong table," she said. She said it quietly, with the precise care of a person choosing words that mean exactly what they say, and for not making it strange. "It's not strange," he said. She turned and looked at him. "No," she said. "I suppose it isn't." He came in at 8:45. Ethan saw him first. A man in his mid-30s, expensively dressed, good-looking in the way of a person who had been told so often that they had made it part of their operating system. He scanned the restaurant with the efficient entitlement of someone accustomed to rooms that rearranged themselves around his arrival. He spotted Amelia and crossed the room with the unhurried confidence of a man who did not believe he was late because he had decided that his arrival defined the start of things. "Amelia." He said her name as though he owned the vowels. He dropped into the chair across from her, Ethan's chair, the one Ethan had shifted to the side of the table, without acknowledging Ethan's existence. Traffic was a nightmare. The snow is absolutely insane. He flagged the sommelier with 2 fingers. "I'll need something immediately." "This is Ethan," Amelia said. Her voice was even. "He kept me company." The man, his name, Ethan would learn shortly, was Preston. Looked at Ethan for the first time. His gaze was the particular kind of slow, beginning at the jacket, moving to the hands, ending at the face, arriving at a conclusion before completing the journey. "Right," Preston said. He looked back at Amelia. "You look well." "I look the same as I always look," she said. "That's not a criticism." He settled back in his chair, with the ease of a man installing himself. "I saw the piece your mother's foundation published last month. The new capital project. Impressive scope." He accepted the glass the sommelier delivered, without looking at him. Of course, the logistics will be a challenge, given his eyes moved to the wheelchair and stayed there a moment too long. The particular constraints involved. The table went very quiet. Ethan set his water glass down. "Constraints," Amelia said. Her voice was flat and careful. The voice of a woman who had done this before, received the small, precise cruelties of people who believed themselves too polished for cruelty. "I'm not being unkind," Preston said, with the tone of a man who believed that announcing his intentions negated the evidence of his behavior. "I'm being practical. Events of that scale require significant physical engagement." "I think," Ethan said, "you should stop." Preston looked at him again. The look was not hostile. It was more dismissive than that, which was its own kind of insult. The implication that hostility would be too much engagement. "I wasn't speaking to you." "You weren't speaking to anyone," Ethan said. "You were speaking at someone, about something that isn't any of your business, in a way that's designed to make her feel small. So I think you should stop." The restaurant had that quality that restaurants get when a table becomes the center of gravity, the nearby conversations that don't quite die but lower, the peripheral glances, the held breath of strangers who are not watching, but are watching. Preston looked at Amelia with the expression of a man seeking backup against an inconvenience. Amelia was looking at her water glass. "He's just a Preston," began. "Not anymore," Ethan said. He stood up. He looked at Amelia. "Do you want to leave?" She looked up at him. Her expression was very controlled, and beneath the control there was something raw and bright and furious, and also, somehow, surprised, the expression of someone who had waited a long time to be asked a particular question and had stopped expecting it. "Yes," she said. The cold hit them like a wall. It was the good kind of cold, the kind that is honest about what it is, that doesn't apologize, that makes everything feel clean and immediate. Ethan walked beside Amelia as she moved down the sidewalk, the wheelchair's wheels crunching lightly on the packed snow, and neither of them spoke for half a block. Then Amelia said, "I'm sorry you got pulled into that." "I'm not," Ethan said. She glanced at him sideways. "You don't have to say that. I know." He looked ahead at the street, the buildings lit golden above the snow line, the occasional car moving slowly through the white. "I'm saying it," because it's true. They walked, or she rolled, and he walked, and neither of them made the distinction another half block before he spotted the truck. It was a small food truck, parked in the narrow alley between a dry cleaner and a bookshop. Its awning strung with Edison bulbs that collected snowflakes and glowed amber and warm. A handwritten sign in the window said, "Grilled cheese soup warmth. Free with purchase." "There," Ethan said. Amelia looked at the truck and then at him. "You want to get grilled cheese? After a dinner where I understood maybe 40% of the menu?" "Yes. Absolutely yes." The corner of her mouth moved. "Okay," she said. The truck's operator, a heavy-set man in his 50s named Carl, who turned out to know Ethan from a transmission job 3 years back, handed them 2 grilled cheese sandwiches in paper bags, 2 cups of tomato soup in paper cups, and refused to take more than $4. They settled on a bench nearby, the kind the city puts out in optimistic spring and forgets to remove before winter, and ate in the snow. The sandwiches were extraordinary. The bread was thick-cut sourdough, buttered to a perfect golden crunch, and the cheese pulled in long threads when you bit. The soup was thick with basil. Ethan ate with the undisguised satisfaction of a man who has been freed from pretension. Amelia ate and didn't pretend she wasn't enjoying it. At some point she said, "The accident was 4 years ago." She said it to the middle distance, not quite to him, the way you say certain things when you've decided to say them, but haven't decided how to make eye contact while saying them. "Car accident. I was a passenger. The driver, a friend, walked away. I didn't. Not the same way." A pause. "The doctors were optimistic for a while. I had some function back for about a year. Then I didn't." Ethan listened without moving, without filling the pauses with comfort. "I used to run," she said. "Half marathons. I was training for my first full when it happened." She looked at her hands. "I paint now, which I always did. But before it was secondary, now it's the thing." Her hands were in her lap, cold reddened at the knuckles. Without thinking about it or thinking about it so quickly, the thought was indistinguishable from instinct. Ethan reached over and took them gently, cupping them between his own. His hands were large and calloused from years of wrenches and engine work, warm in the specific way of hands that have spent years generating heat. She went very still. "Your hands are freezing," he said. "I know. You should have said something. I didn't want to." "I know," he said. "But you can." He held her hands a moment longer, warming them the way you warm something that needs warmth and not ceremony. And then he let them go. "Your hands are good hands," he said. "Painter's hands. They should be warm." She looked at him. "I'm not saying it to be kind," he said. "I know," she said. And for the first time that evening, really the first time, the full and unguarded version, she smiled. It transformed her face, the way a window transforms a wall, not adding something foreign but revealing what was already present behind the barrier. The snow fell around them, fine and silent. Carl's truck hummed. Somewhere down the block, a car alarm went off briefly and stopped. Boston settled into its deep winter quiet, and in that quiet, something between them settled too, something that had been uncertain for the last 2 hours. Some question asked in the language of proximity and small kindnesses, and answered now without either of them having to put words to it. In the weeks that followed, they kept finding each other. Amelia came into the garage on a Tuesday in January, with a 2019 Subaru that was making a sound she described as a sustained existential complaint. Ethan diagnosed the front bearings and fixed them in an afternoon. And she sat in the small waiting area with a sketchbook and drew while he worked. And when the car was done, neither of them mentioned the absurdity of her having driven 20 minutes past 2 other mechanics to reach his shop. They ran into each other at the farmer's market in the South End on Saturday morning, which would have seemed like coincidence if Amelia hadn't, the previous Wednesday, mentioned to Ethan that she went there most Saturdays, and if Ethan hadn't, the previous Thursday, bought a canvas bag for no reason he could articulate. They took Lily to the common. This was Lily's idea. Technically, she had heard Ethan mention Amelia's name enough times to have formed opinions, and she stated flatly one Friday evening that she wanted to meet the person who gave her dad the drawing that was now on the refrigerator. The drawing was a small pencil sketch Amelia had done in the waiting room, a cross-section of an engine, labeled in neat architectural print with small annotations that were partly technical and partly whimsical, the kind of drawing that suggested the hand behind it took joy seriously. At the Common, Lily gave Amelia approximately 4 minutes before declaring her acceptable. She then used the remaining 90% of the visit to establish the scientific protocols of Snowfort architecture, explaining in considerable detail why walls needed to be angled at 15 degrees to prevent collapse, a theory she had developed through empirical testing. "She's remarkable," Amelia said to Ethan while Lily inspected a snowbank with the severity of a structural engineer. "She got all the good parts," Ethan said. He was watching his daughter with that particular expression that parents wear when they think no one is looking wholly unguarded, quietly awed, the expression of a person who can't quite believe their luck. Amelia painted it. Later. From memory. She didn't show him for a while. She was working on the larger canvas, a series she'd been building for 2 years, explorations of negative space and momentum, the geometry of things in motion. She told Ethan about it one evening when he came by her apartment with takeout from the Thai place on Tremont, and she showed him the works in progress leaned against the studio wall, large kinetic pieces, the kind that seemed to move when you stepped back from them. He stood in front of them for a long time. "What do you see?" she asked. She asked, without anxiety, with the clean curiosity of someone who genuinely wanted to know. "They look like something trying to be still," he said, "but not quite making it. Like they're still in the middle of whatever happened." She looked at him. "Yeah," she said. "That's exactly right." He stayed 3 hours. They ate takeout on the studio floor and talked about things they hadn't talked about with anyone in a long time, not because the topics were secret but because the people had been missing, the specific people who could receive the weight of certain conversations without flinching or redirecting. He told her about Lily's mother, Angela, not a villain story, just a true one. A young marriage that was wrong in the quiet way that quietly wrong things are, that took 3 years to acknowledge itself. He said Angela was good, that she was remarried in Portland with a daughter of her own, that they had a functional co-parenting relationship built on mutual respect and the shared conviction that Lily deserved better than their failures. Amelia told him about her mother. She told it carefully, choosing her words with the precision of someone navigating a room with furniture they know is there in the dark. Victoria Grant, CEO of Grant Strategic Capital, built from nothing over 30 years into one of the most respected institutional investment firms in the Northeast. A woman of extraordinary force and genuine brilliance, who had also never, in Amelia's lifetime, managed to separate her assessments of situations from her need to control outcomes. "She loves me," Amelia said. "I want to be clear about that. It's not a question, but," Ethan said, "but she loves the version of me that she can account for," Amelia said. "The one that fits into the narrative she's built. And when I make a choice that she didn't model, she doesn't know what to do with that." She paused. After the accident, she was extraordinary. For 6 months, she was the most present I've ever known her. And then when it became clear that she gestured at the wheelchair with the casual shorthand of someone to whom the gesture is long familiar was permanent. She shifted. She found a new way to manage it, to manage me. She looked at her hands, to love me in a way that doesn't quite let me breathe. Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Does she know about me?" he said. "Not yet," Amelia said. He heard what that meant. "Okay," he said. It happened on a Thursday in February, which was a perfectly ordinary Thursday until it wasn't. They had been rolling and walking along the river path, which was barely cleared and probably unwise, but the afternoon light had gone that particular late winter gold that turns everything into something you want to preserve, and they had not been able to justify going somewhere else. Ethan had his hands in his pockets, and Amelia had pulled her scarf up around her ears, and they were talking about something insignificant and pleasant, and then there was the click. He didn't hear it. Amelia didn't either, but the photograph existed regardless. The two of them framed against the white river. Ethan half turned toward Amelia. Amelia's face tilted up in mid-laughter, the kind of photograph that captures not just an image, but an atmosphere, a warmth that was visible even at distance. The story went up Friday morning. Grant heiress, spotted with mystery man. Who is Victoria Grant's daughter dating? By the time Ethan arrived at the garage that morning, Marcus had called twice. By the time Ethan opened the first news article on his phone during his lunch break, several others had identified him. Ethan Cole, 34. Owner of Cole's Auto on Commonwealth Avenue. The framing ranged from the salacious to the merely reductive, but all of it converged on the same fascinated disbelief. The CEO's daughter and the mechanic. The class architecture of it apparently too compelling to resist. Ethan's phone rang at 2 in the afternoon, a number he didn't recognize. He answered, "Mr. Cole." The voice was a woman's, measured, precise, the voice of someone who had spent decades making rooms fall quiet by speaking into them. "This is Victoria Grant. I'd like to speak with you at your convenience, though I would suggest the sooner the better." He said he could meet on Saturday. She said she'd prefer Friday. He said Friday worked. He didn't tell Amelia. Not because he was hiding it, he told himself, but because he wanted to understand what it was first. He wanted to go in and come out, and then tell her about the whole thing, rather than have her walk into the meeting with the knowledge of it ahead of him. He told himself this was rational, and not, in any way, the beginning of something that would go wrong. He was half right. The meeting with Victoria Grant was in a conference room on the 41st floor of a building in the financial district, all glass and altitude, and the particular temperature of rooms that are kept slightly too cold as a technique. Victoria Grant was 62, silver-haired, wearing a suit the color of slate, and she looked at Ethan across the table with the comprehensive attention of a person who was accustomed to reading rooms and had already read him. She was not unkind. He had expected hostility, and she was not hostile. She was something more sophisticated. She was reasonable. She presented her concerns with the structured logic of someone who had prepared the argument and knew it was sound. She spoke about Amelia's history, her vulnerability, the years of reconstruction after the accident, the fragility of the equilibrium they had reached. She spoke about the attention, the press, the way certain kinds of exposure could destabilize. She spoke about what Amelia needed, and she framed it in the language of love. And it was in the language of love, which was what made it so hard to argue with. "I'm not asking you to disappear," she said. "I'm asking you to consider what you're asking of her." He drove home through traffic and didn't eat dinner, and sat in the dark kitchen for an hour, while Lily slept upstairs, and he thought about it with the seriousness it deserved. Amelia felt it before she understood it. There was a shift in him, not dramatic, nothing she could point to as a single event, but a new quality to his presence, a slight drawing back, the way a tide changes direction before it's visible in the water. He was still warm. He was still present, but there was a fraction of distance that hadn't been there before, a careful space between them that felt deliberate. She knew about the meeting with her mother by the following Monday. Her mother's assistant had sent a calendar notification to the wrong email address, an old account Amelia still checked, and she had seen the entry. Cole, E. 4:30 p.m. CR 41. She hadn't said anything. She waited to see if Ethan would. He didn't. They met at the coffee shop on Columbus on a Wednesday afternoon in late February. The city outside was gray and exhausted. The snow gone dirty. The last weeks of winter doing their worst. Amelia came in from the cold and found him already there. And she knew from the way he was sitting careful, prepared, that this was a conversation he had rehearsed. She sat across from him. He said, "I think we should slow down." She heard the words that were under the words. She had spent 31 years learning to read the architecture of what people meant versus what they said. "Slow down," she repeated. "I don't want to." He stopped. He looked at the table. "The attention isn't fair to you. The press. I'm a distraction from things you've built. Things that matter." She looked at him for a long moment. "You spoke to my mother," she said. The smallest pause. "Yes." "When?" "Last Friday." She kept her voice even. It was an effort that anyone paying attention could have measured. "And you didn't tell me." "I was going to." "You met with my mother about me," she said. "And you decided not to tell me." And now you're sitting here saying words that I recognize because she's been saying them to me in different forms for 4 years. She stopped. She breathed. I'm not angry that you spoke to her. I'm telling you that what you're saying right now is not coming from you. He looked up. His jaw was tight. What if she's right? He said. And she could hear that he meant it, that this wasn't performance. That somewhere in the past week he had absorbed the argument into his own doubt, the way a true thing and a manipulated thing can sound identical if they're said with enough conviction. What if I'm making your life harder? What if you're making it better? She said. Have you considered that? Amelia, I need you, she said quietly, to make your own decision, not hers, not one you've borrowed from her because it sounded reasonable and it let you believe it was yours. She held his gaze. What do you want? He didn't answer. She left first. She drove home in the gray afternoon and went directly to her studio and didn't paint. She sat in front of the blank canvas and looked at it for a long time. And it looked back. And neither of them had anything useful to say. He wrote it on a Sunday. He had been sitting at the kitchen table since Lily went to bed, with a legal pad and a pen, trying to get it right. He had started 4 times and crossed out 4 attempts that were either too much or not enough, that explained too little or explained so much they became defenses rather than honesty. What he finally wrote was not long. Amelia, I'm sorry. I handled it wrong. And I think I owe you the truth about why. She got inside my doubt, not because she was wrong, exactly, but because I already had the doubt, and she put words to it. The doubt that says, you're not the right fit for the life you're in. You're the wrong table. And maybe the right thing is to acknowledge that, and go. I don't want to go. I want you to know that. But I also don't know how to watch you absorb the cost of being connected to me and feel good about myself. I'm going to give you some time and some space. Because I think you need it, and because I think I need it too. Not permanently, but enough to figure out what's real. I don't regret sitting at the wrong table. I want you to know that too. He folded it and left it in her mailbox before dawn. She read it in the morning and sat with it for a long time, long enough that the coffee she'd made went cold. Then she called him. He didn't pick up. She called 3 more times over the next week, and he let them all go to voicemail, and she understood that he was not going to answer, and the understanding sat in her chest like a stone that had been placed there carefully and with intention. She told herself it was fine. She painted. She attended the 2 foundation meetings she had scheduled and was good in them, clear and organized and authoritative, and came home afterward and sat in the studio again and looked at the canvas that was still blank. She was not fine. The blizzard came in on a Saturday night in March, the last winter storm of the season, the kind that always arrives late with something to prove. The forecast had said 4 to 6 inches. By 9 p.m., there were already 8, and the snow was still coming in near horizontal sheets, driven by a wind that had no patience for obstacles. Amelia had not slept in 3 days. Not genuinely slept, she had done the lying down version. The hours of staring at the ceiling with the body's lights off, and the mind's lights obstinately on. She had been here before, in the first year after the accident, and she recognized the particular quality of this exhaustion, the way it stripped the world down to its least forgiving geometry, until the warmth that normally insulated her from certain conclusions went cold. She went out because she needed to move, which was not rational, but rationality was not available. She took the river path, the same path where the photograph had been taken. She didn't do this consciously, or she told herself she didn't, in the way that the conscious mind sometimes tells itself convenient things about the unconscious mind's geography. The snow was deep enough that her wheels were struggling, the rims slick, the path disappearing into white. She kept moving until she reached the pedestrian bridge, the one with the iron railings, and she stopped. She sat there in the blizzard and looked at the river, which was gray and fast and indifferent under its partial shell of ice, and she breathed. This was not, she told herself firmly, what it looked like. She was not at the edge of anything. She was simply very tired and very cold, and had made a mistake in coming out. The chair shifted on the ice. It happened suddenly. The bridge's surface, which she hadn't registered as iced over, was iced over. and the chair's front wheels found the gradient, and moved, and she grabbed the railing with both hands, and the railing was slick, and the world went briefly sideways with the cold and the noise of the storm, and the simple animal reality of falling, and Amelia. He was there. She didn't understand how. She didn't ask. He was there, in the storm, his jacket white with accumulated snow. And he caught the chair's frame with both hands and planted his feet, and held it, and held it, and the slide stopped. He didn't let go. "Ethan," she said. "I know," he said. He was breathing hard. From the cold, and the effort, and something else. Something that had nothing to do with either. "I know. I'm sorry. I've been driving around for." He stopped. He looked at her face in the storm, the snow in her hair, her hands still white-knuckled on the railing. "I'm not ready to lose you," he said. "I need you to know that. Whatever the rest of it is, I am not ready to lose you." The storm moved around them in its vast, indifferent machinery. She reached up and took his face between her two cold hands, the painter's hands, the ink-stained hands. The hands he had told her were good hands, and she held him there. And she looked at him, the way people look at things they have been afraid they would not see again. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Don't go away again," she said. "I won't," he said. "I promise." He pulled her close, and she let him, and they stayed there on the bridge in the storm, while the snow made its slow democracy over the city, covering everything equally, making everything new. He asked for the meeting. Victoria's assistant tried to redirect him twice, and he was patient both times, and said he'd be there at 10 on Monday, and he was there at 10 on Monday, and he sat across from Victoria Grant in the same 41st floor conference room, and waited while she studied him the way she had studied him before, with the total attention of someone taking inventory. "I imagine you have a speech prepared," she said. "I don't, actually," he said. She waited. "I'm going to be in her life," he said. "I want you to understand that as a statement of fact, rather than a challenge. I'm not here to fight with you, or to ask your permission. I'm here because I think she loves you. And I don't want to be something that damages that relationship if I can avoid it." Victoria said nothing. "She told me you built your company from nothing," he said. "That you've spent 30 years making something real out of whatever you were given. I understand that impulse. I understand what it makes you the need to control outcomes, to protect the things that matter by managing the variables around them." He paused. "I'm not a variable. I'm a person, and so is she. She's my daughter," Victoria said. Her voice was very level. "Yes," Ethan said, "and she makes her own choices. The accident didn't change that. The wheelchair didn't change that." He held her gaze. "She doesn't need to be protected from me. She needs to be trusted to know what she needs." A long silence. Victoria looked out the window. The March sky was a clean, pale blue. The last of the snow gone. The city rinsed and waiting for spring. "You have a daughter of your own," she said. "I do, so you understand," she said. And it was not quite a question. "I understand wanting to stand between her and every bad thing," he said. "Yes. But I also understand that the standing between doesn't work past a certain point. And after that point, it just becomes weight." Another silence. Longer. Victoria Grant did not say, "You have my blessing." She did not say, "I approve." She said, "I'd like to have dinner. The four of you, Amelia, your daughter, and myself, in a restaurant where I make the reservation." A pause. "And I will order without making anyone feel inadequate about the menu." Ethan looked at her for a moment. "Lily is 7, he said. "She has strong opinions about pancake shapes." "Then I'll find somewhere with good pancakes," Victoria said, and there was something in her voice very small, very controlled. A thing she was not accustomed to permitting that might, in another person, have been the beginning of a smile. 6 months passed. Seasons move differently when you're paying attention to them. Summer came, the hot, salt-edged Boston summer, the harbor flat and bright. The city suddenly remembering how to be green. Lily started 2nd grade. Ethan took on 2 new mechanics at the garage, and the place stopped requiring him to work 70-hour weeks, which surprised him by being a relief rather than a loss. Amelia's series still in motion, the works in progress that had leaned against her studio wall, opened at a gallery in the South End in July, to the kind of attention that surprised her by not surprising her, because she had made the work with the specific intention of making it true. And true things have a way of finding the people who need them. Victoria came to the opening. She wore charcoal and stood in front of the large centerpiece for a long time, without speaking. Afterward, she found Amelia by the food table and said, "It's the best work you've done." Amelia said, "I know." Victoria looked at her and then at Ethan across the room, who was crouching down to show Lily something in the catalog, while Lily pointed at various paintings with the authority of a small critic who had decided she had opinions about art. "He's good with her," Victoria said. "He's good," Amelia said, simply, as though there were no further qualification needed. The ceremony was in September, which they had chosen because September in Boston is the city at its best. Warm enough for open air, cool enough to be comfortable. The light honey, colored and long, falling sideways through the afternoon, in a way that made everything look like the memory of itself. Ethan had suggested the garage, not the working floor, the courtyard behind it, a space he'd been slowly improving over 2 years. Paving stones, a trellis he'd built himself, containers of late-season flowers that Lily had picked, and that she now took her role in arranging with considerable seriousness. 30 people. Family, and the people who function as family, which is its own category. Amelia arrived in a dress, the color of a winter sky, that particular shade of pale blue-gray, and the late September light caught her hair and her eyes, and the delicate architecture of her and Ethan watched her come toward him and felt, as he had felt on that first snow-covered night in the wrong restaurant, the specific quality of being exactly where he was supposed to be. The officiant was Marcus, who had gotten ordained online for the occasion, and taken the responsibility with a seriousness that no one had fully anticipated. The vows were their own words. Ethan said, "I sat at the wrong table and found the right person. And I've spent the last year and a half learning what that means. What it means is this. You are the thing that made the rest of it make sense. You and Lily. The life we're building." He stopped. "I promise to show up. In the snow and out of it. At the right table and the wrong one. I promise to be someone you can breathe near." Amelia said, "I spent a long time believing that the best I could do was manage the space I was given. You made me stop managing and start choosing." A pause. "I choose you. Every table, every storm, and then the moment that no one who was there would forget, the moment that Lily, who had been told there might be a small possibility of this, who had been preparing without quite admitting it to herself or to her father, whispered something to Amelia, and Amelia looked at her and nodded. Amelia braced her hands on the wheels. She pushed herself upward. It was not graceful. It was not the moment in a film where the camera slows and the music swells, and the difficulty is erased by the beauty of the symbolism. It was difficult and effortful, and her legs, which still had some function more than the early doctors had suggested, because bodies are not always obedient to their own prognoses, shook with the work of it. She stood, 1 step, then another, 3 steps, then 4, her hand extended, and Ethan's hand meeting it. His face doing something that bypassed expression entirely, and went directly to something beneath expression, something that only has a name in the language people use after. She stood beside him for the exchange of rings. She stood for the pronouncement. Then she sat back down, and he crouched beside her, and they looked at each other in the September light in the courtyard behind the garage, surrounded by the people they loved. And she said, "I told you I would." He laughed, the full, unguarded laugh of a man who has been genuinely surprised by joy. "You did," he said. Later, much later, when the guests had gone and Lily had fallen asleep inside on the couch, and the courtyard was still and lit by string lights, and the last of the September warmth, they sat together in the quiet. Ethan's hand was in Amelia's. Her head was against his shoulder. "Wrong table," she said softly. "Right person," he said. The lights made small, warm circles in the dark. Above them, the stars were appearing one by one through the city's glow. the patient astronomy of the universe doing what it always does, arranging things in patterns that only become visible when you're willing to sit still long enough to look. They sat still. They looked.